Hello, everyone, and welcome. We have a question in the chat that we'd love to have you answer and tell us what your water-wise goals are for this year. And my name's Alyssa Linfield, and I am the Horticulture Program Coordinator here at the El Paso County Extension Office. And we're very excited today to be hosting Catherine Moravec from Colorado Springs Utilities. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We are your host for the class today, Colorado State University Extension in El Paso County. And if you are not familiar with Extension, I want to tell you just a little bit about who we are. So Colorado State University is the land grant institution here in Colorado. And through Extension, we are the outreach arm of the university. So our mission is to provide the community with information that you can use every day. So specifically in our horticulture programs, we provide you with horticulture information for home gardeners. We also have our Master Gardener program. But in our El Paso County Extension office, we have a number of other programs through our 4-H Youth Development Program, our food safety and food preservation programs, and many more. So if you're interested in finding out about some of our other programs, you can visit our website at elpaso.extension.colostate.edu. We are an equal opportunity access and non-discrimination university. So Colorado State University is an equal opportunity provider. Colorado State University does not discriminate on the basis of disability and is committed to providing reasonable accommodations. Colorado State University's Office of Engagement and Extension ensures meaningful access and equal opportunities to participate to individuals whose first language is not English. We have a number of other classes coming up that I want to quickly highlight. In March, we have a rainwater harvesting class via Zoom and also a rain gardens class via Zoom. We have an in-person soil basics class, and then we have an online urban composting class. In April, we'll have an in-person advanced soils lab where people can bring their own soil samples and do testing on those soil samples. And then we have a Firewise gardening class that is online, as well as many more that are coming up after that. So you can register for any of these classes at epcextension.eventbrite.com. And I am going to stop sharing my screen now and turn it over to Catherine. And Catherine, if you want to unmute and share your screen, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I am going to give a quick introduction for you. So Catherine has worked for Colorado Springs Utilities in the Water Conservation Group for the past 15 years. She specializes in water-wise landscaping and earned an MS in horticulture from University of California at Davis and a bachelor's degree in biology from CU Boulder. She grew up in the Denver area, and a fun fact is that last year she tried growing lots of different varieties of eggplants, including purple eggplants, white eggplants, and mottled eggplants that have both colors. So Catherine, thanks for joining us. And I really quickly wanted to tell everyone, if you have questions at all during Catherine's talk, please put those in the chat. So welcome, Catherine, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Alyssa. I appreciate being here and having the opportunity to share this information. And just wanted to say that I think our El Paso County Extension Office is awesome, and we're so lucky to have Alyssa and Irene there. So just kudos to you, and kudos to all the master gardeners out there who are doing great things to help get good information to our community members. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to be talking about, let's see if I can get myself moving here. Here we go. Alyssa, can you just give me a verbal confirmation that you can see the
Yes, we can
agenda?
see. Perfect.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to be talking a little bit about water in El Paso County. We'll talk about risks to our water sources, some statewide efforts to encourage water conservation, the role of water providers, and then also water stewardship actions for individuals. And so hopefully what you'll walk away with today is kind of an understanding of the water situation at a high level in El Paso County, some of the challenges that we're all facing together, and that what we can do as individuals to help take action towards a more sustainable future. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off with just some high level information about water in El Paso County. And as Alyssa mentioned, I work for Colorado Springs Utilities, which definitely has a unique position in El Paso County in terms of being a water provider. So what I'm going to try to do is give you a sense of Colorado Springs utility system and water situation, but also broaden that out to the county as a whole. So the first thing that we all know and are well aware of is that water is a critical life-sustaining resource. And we use it to drink, we use it to flush the toilet, to shower, to bathe. We also use it to water our landscapes, which are very important assets to our community. And then our business partners use it for manufacturing processes and park watering and all sorts of different uses in our community. That being said, we live in a semi-arid climate, and I know for many of you this is not new information, but if we really look at our precipitation in this area, we get about 13 inches of precipitation from rainfall during the summer and another 3 inches from snowfall in the winter for a total of 16 inches, which does classify us as a semi-arid climate. Of course, the farther north you get in El Paso County, the more precipitation you're going to get compared to the southern end. When you talk to water supply planners, they have been in the situation that El Paso County has been water short for over 100 years. So when Europeans started settling this area and building buildings in El Paso County, we quickly outgrew our water supply in the late 1800s. And that's because the Pikes Peak region doesn't have a natural river. We have two little creeks, but not enough water volume to really sustain a large growing city. So what that means is that El Paso County has had a different trajectory than other counties along the Front Range. If you look at, say, Denver County, the Denver area, they had the South Platte moving through that area. Pueblo, of course, has the Arkansas River. The South Platte carries water all the way through northern Colorado. So those counties developed a much more rich agricultural heritage with irrigated crops. With that situation where they had a major river, those river basins can now support their growing cities by transferring water from agriculture to their municipalities. And the South Platte River Basin would be a really important example of that transfer that's occurring. But Colorado Springs and El Paso County, we do not have that same agricultural heritage in terms of irrigated crops, and we don't have this bank of agricultural water to draw upon to support our municipalities. I do want to draw your attention to the El Paso County Master Water Plan. This is a fantastic, this is the Water Master Plan, I should say, but it's a fantastic document that was prepared for the El Paso County Commissioners and the Planning and Development Department to provide a holistic look at water within the county. And it really is a good overview if you're interested in the water supplies, what are the water providers, current and future needs, as well as the potential gap between supply and needs in the future and how they recommend closing the gap. So if you haven't read this document, it is a really good resource for all of us. And it's just a wealth of information. It's available free and online. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how do El Paso County residents get water? Well, this is a map of El Paso County here. You can see we have that little blip on the left that goes and encompasses Pikes Peak. But the vast majority of the municipal area is Colorado Springs. We do have some smaller municipal areas, including Palmer Lake, Monument, Manitou Springs, and Fountain, Falcon as well, Calhan, Peyton. But the vast majority of the urban and suburban areas are within Colorado Springs. But that being said, we have 70 water providers in El Paso County. Those include municipalities as well as special districts that supply water to a neighborhood or an area of a city or a development. In addition, in the rural areas of El Paso County, we have 21,000 permitted wells. So there are a lot of people that are getting their water through individually owned wells, as well as wells that are owned by special districts and municipalities. So the elephant in the room here is really that Colorado Springs Utilities has a water service area that supplies that blue area in the center of the map. However, there are a lot of other water providers and well owners and operators that operate within the county as well. So if you read the El Paso County Water Master Plan, what you'll find is that there are 4 categories of water sources within El Paso County. And they categorize these as native renewable water, imported renewable water, designated basin groundwater, and Denver basin groundwater. And we'll step through each of these so you have an understanding of what they are and some of the opportunities and challenges associated with each one of these water sources. So native renewable water, that would be water that is part of our stream system within El Paso County. And as I mentioned, we have very little of this type of water. So we do have Monument Creek, which has headwaters up by Palmer Lake, close to the Palmer Divide. The water that sheds off the foothills there flows into Monument Creek. And then we also have Fountain Creek, which its headwaters are up in Teller County, and that water flows through Manitou Springs into Fountain Creek. It then joins up with Monument Creek, sort of on the south side of Colorado Springs, and then flows down into Pueblo Reservoir. So we have a very limited amount of native renewable water. We do have some alluvial aquifers, so these are places where the stream water will soak into the ground and create a pool of water that can be used. I think the most well-known aquifer in El Paso County would be the Widefield Aquifer. The challenge that we have is that a lot of our alluvial aquifers can contain PFAS or other contamination because you're getting all of that surface runoff going into those aquifers. There are some water providers in El Paso County who have rights to alluvial wells off of Monument Creek towards the north and some off of Fountain Creek as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about imported renewable water. Because there wasn't a whole lot of native renewable water within El Paso County, back in the late 1800s, people within Colorado Springs started looking west to try to find renewable water sources that could be brought to the Colorado Springs area. So they first looked at Pikes Peak and developed water supplies off of that system. And then when we outgrew that water supply, we looked even farther west, west of the Continental Divide. And we have several different systems that bring West Slope water to the Eastern Slope. The Denver area also does that, and then up in northern Colorado as well. So there are about 56 different tunnels that bring water from the West Slope to the Front Range to meet the demands of our populations. Now in El Paso County, most of the West Slope water that's brought to the Colorado Springs area is through the Colorado Springs utility systems. There are a few other water suppliers that do have some rights to West Slope water, but those are typically supplemental water sources that are fairly limited. If you're interested in learning more about how Colorado Springs Utilities brings this West Slope water and kind of an overview of its system in general, there is a really great ArcGIS story map called From Watershed to Your Water Tap that you can use to explore this system. In terms of Colorado Springs Utilities, virtually all of our supply is supplied from surface water that is captured as snow melts in the high country. Roughly 70% of that supply comes from the Colorado River Basin, and then another 25% comes from the Pikes Peak sources and the Arkansas River. We get the last 5% from the South Platte River Basin. So for Colorado Springs Utilities and that big blue blob in the middle of that map, Our surface water supplies are renewable, but because they're based on snowpack, those supplies are highly variable. And as I mentioned, because Colorado Springs doesn't have a major river running through it, Colorado Springs Utilities has built a very complex system of storage and delivery to get water to Colorado Springs. So this includes 3 major pipelines, 26 different reservoirs, many different pump stations, 6 water treatment plants, etc. So it is a highly complex system to bring water from as far as 100 miles away up by Leadville, all the way to Colorado Springs. And that does lead to the water prices in Colorado Springs being a little bit more expensive than you're going to find in other Front Range communities that do have a major river that can transport water. Okay, now the third type of water that we're going to talk about is called designated basin groundwater. Now, this type of groundwater is groundwater that, of course, is below the surface of the soil, and it is replenished only by infiltration, not streams. Now, there are 3 different designated basin groundwater systems within El Paso County. The orange area that you see there is the Upper Black Squirrel Creek system. There's also the Kiowa Bijou system that is up in the pink area towards the very north part of El Paso County. And up towards the northeast, you're going to find a little bit of the Upper Big Sandy Creek system. Now, keep in mind that these are renewable sources of groundwater, but they are limited in supply and typically over appropriated. So in general, most of the designated basin groundwater sources are pretty well tapped out. So there's not a lot of unused water in those systems. The last type of water that we're going to talk about is Denver Basin groundwater. Now keep in mind that the Denver Basin is this rainbow of colors that really exist throughout the Front Range and is the reason why we have a major metropolis in terms of the Denver metro area. The Denver Basin groundwater system stretches from Greeley all the way to Colorado Springs and from the foothills all the way to Lyman. Because this is a groundwater system, it is a really great source because it's protected from surface water pollution, but it is single-use water, meaning once we use it, there is not water infiltration back into the Denver Basin aquifers in any scale of human time. So as we use this water, we get one chance to use it, and as we use it, it is gone to the aquifer and to our systems from there. But it is a major source of water in El Paso County. If you look at the Denver Basin aquifer system, there are 4 different formations, and all 4 of those formations do come into El Paso County, typically in the northern half. Outside of Colorado Springs Utilities, the Denver Basin groundwater system is the primary water supply for most El Paso County residents. And as I mentioned, it's single-use water. So it is something that we need to be concerned about in the sense that when these systems run out of water, they will not be replenished by natural methods. As more and more people are using the Denver Basin groundwater system, the levels of water within those aquifers are declining, which is causing individual well owners and municipal water providers to have to increase their pumping costs and sometimes re-drill new wells to be able to go a little bit deeper. So because a lot of El Paso County is reliant upon the Denver Basin groundwater system, which is not necessarily renewable, it is a very high priority to look at diversifying those supplies for those communities. All right, and then what I'm going to do is just briefly work through some of the risks to our water sources, and then we'll have time for a question break. So throughout the southwestern US, water scarcity concerns are creating a sense of urgency. And this is not unique in Colorado or in El Paso County. This is something that is occurring throughout the southwestern US, Arizona, Nevada, California, Utah, New Mexico. All of these areas are in general experiencing a lot of pressures on their water systems, and they're causing a lot of activity to to address those concerns. Now, if we look at some of the conditions that are driving change, here in El Paso County, I would say that the primary pressure we're experiencing is population growth. And that is a challenge, especially for areas that are reliant on groundwater sources. So if you imagine yourself having a cup of juice and you have one straw going into that cup, you know, you're going to enjoy and you're going to have enough juice for yourself. If you have a friend come by and put a straw in that cup as well, then, you know, you have to share that juice. If you have 100 different straws in that same cup, then the pressure on that cup of juice just becomes more stressed. And that's what we're seeing on our groundwater sources. That is also a concern for communities like Colorado Springs that are dependent on surface water, but a little bit less so than the groundwater sources. And in part, that is because a lot of the surface water can be stored in reservoirs when we have good wet years so we can use it for dry periods. However, for those communities that also are reliant on surface water, climate change and prolonged drought are major challenges that are creating pressures as well. So if you haven't had the chance to read the new climate change report from the Colorado Climate Center, I would certainly encourage you to take a look at that. It was just published on January 8th, so it's got all the updated data that is available to Coloradans. And the Colorado Climate Center did an excellent job kind of summarizing the potential impacts that we're likely to see here in Colorado, what direction those impacts would be, and then how certain they are about those impacts related to the data that they have and the modeling. One thing they're fairly certain about in Colorado is that we will be experiencing a warmer climate for sure. They're very certain about that prediction. And then in terms of precipitation, the most recent data has shown that will probably be looking at a drier future, but there is some uncertainty about that as the weather patterns kind of change and interact with each other from the southwestern US to the north. It's just not totally clear that we'll be drier, but that is what the most recent data is showing. So with that, that will certainly impact the amount of water that is yielded off of the snow melt in Colorado. And so it's something that we all need to be aware of and plan for. Now, for those of you that live in Colorado Springs, as I mentioned, about 70% of our supply comes from the Colorado River. And if you've been watching the news, you know that the Colorado River has really been in crisis for the past 20 years. It supports 40 million people, and it's been experiencing a major drought for the last 20 years that appears to be the worst drought within 1,200 years. Lake Powell and Lake Mead are at critically low levels, even though last year they did get some relief from the good snowpack. But the bottom line for the Colorado River is that how the system is managed is going to have to change. Now, we're very lucky here in the state of Colorado that we have a fantastic negotiator for the state of Colorado on our rights to the Colorado River, and she is just doing a fantastic job ensuring that Colorado is at the table negotiating for the ability to use our full appropriation. So she did a really good webinar, I think it was last week, where she said she does not expect mandatory cutbacks to be implemented on the Colorado River in the near future, but they are actively managing and negotiating how the Colorado River system, and in particular Lake Powell and Lake Mead, are going to be managed after 2026. So they're really trying to ensure that the system is managed with the actual hydrological conditions in mind, which is a big step forward for that system. Okay, so that being said, we have a vibrant community. Colorado is an amazing place to live. Yes, we do live in a water short area, but we've always lived in a water short area. The one thing that we do need to know is that the state of Colorado has done a water plan, and based on the amount of people that they expect to move into Colorado, and the water supplies that are available, they do project a statewide water supply gap. What that means is that the amount of water that will be required in the future, we don't have all that water supply available today. And that water supply gap is estimated to range between 230,000 to 740,000 acre feet per year. So what does that mean? That's similar to the volume of water that 3 to 10 cities about the size of Colorado Springs use every year. So it's a fairly significant amount of water, but you'll notice that that range is actually pretty large. And it depends on how much growth occurs, how much cooperation and conservation we do. And so there's a wide range of futures available to us here in the state. Now, if you look at the larger cities, they really only have 4 options to be able to meet that water supply gap. And that gap is typically going to be met through partners and partnerships with and transfers from irrigated agriculture. And that is where a partnership would be an agreement where maybe a rural community would be able to use the water 5 out of 10 years, and then 5 out of 10 years, that water would be available to the municipality to use. So it's kind of an agreement that is longstanding that allows some of that water to stay in the agricultural community part-time and then supply the municipalities part-time. And that's what Colorado Springs Utilities is really trying to move towards, is rather than just purchasing water from agriculture and moving it permanently to a municipality, instead having a partnership agreement. Now, there are some communities in Colorado that are still really looking at just straight out purchases of water from irrigated agriculture, but Colorado Springs Utilities typically doesn't do that anymore. Another option for meeting a water supply gap is through reuse. And what that means is either exchanging water supplies that can be reused with other water users. And that is something that Colorado Springs Utilities does fully today. So when we have water that can be reused and it goes to the water treatment plant and goes back into the creek, and we know that that water is water that we can reuse, then we will trade that water going downstream for water higher up in our water collection system. Now, that's kind of what we call indirect reuse, but there's also direct reuse where a water provider might take the water that they have coming out of a water treatment plant, clean it up to drinking water standards, and then put it back in the water treatment plant itself. So I should have said wastewater recovery facility. So they take water that has come through the wastewater system, clean it up, and then put it back in the water treatment plant. Today, Colorado Springs Utilities doesn't have a system like that we use, but that is something that we would certainly consider moving forward in order to meet our community's needs. And there are projects in Denver and the Aurora area that do this already, and they've been very successful. Another option for meeting a water supply gap is through increasing storage. So as I mentioned, Colorado Springs Utilities has about 26 different reservoirs that we store water in. So rather than creating a new reservoir, typically what happens today is that a reservoir would be emptied, and then the bottom would be dug out so that it could be a deeper reservoir, so that more water could be stored in that reservoir when we have a really great wet year. So that's an opportunity to be able to meet a supply gap. And then the fourth option for meeting a supply gap is through water conservation. And there are many different types of water conservation programs. And this is important for every single community to do, because the more efficient we can be with our water, the smaller our gap is. So very, very important. The one thing that we have found at Colorado Springs Utilities is that we cannot meet our water supply gap through just one of these options. We have to use a combination of all of these types of approaches to be able to successfully meet our water supply gap. All right, so with that, I did want to say I wanted to go into the current drought monitor, but if you're interested in finding out more about Colorado Springs Utilities' very specific plan for water sustainability, there is really great information at csu.org where you can read about the water supply sustainability plan, the water efficiency plan, to be able to understand what that plan looks like for the next 50 years. And some communities have that level of planning, and other communities, their level of planning is a little bit more modest. So it just spans a wide variety of planning efforts in El Paso County. Okay, so now I wanted to just go through the current drought monitor. This was from February 13th. And boy, this is looking really good right now. Since we've had some recent snow and even some rain in February, we are not seeing a lot of drought, especially on the eastern half of Colorado. So thank goodness, that's a wonderful improvement. We are still seeing the west slope being a little bit on the abnormally dry side, and where you see the tan and the orange, especially in the center of southern Colorado, those areas are still in drought. So, this is one of those things where typically some portion of the state in Colorado is in drought at any given time. And just right now, what we're seeing is the eastern part of the state looking really in good shape, and the western and southern sides looking a bit drier. And one thing that we monitor constantly is the snow water equivalent. As Colorado Springs Utilities, because we get our water from melted snowfall, we're constantly monitoring how much water is in the snow at any given time in the winter. And this particular graph was more in the yellow and orange area about a month ago. So our snowpack was looking pretty low. But now after these recent storms, it's in the green area, meaning we're right about average in terms of snow water equivalent for the year. That's very promising. But the vast majority of the snow that accumulates within the state of Colorado happens in March and April. So we still have a long way to go, but right now we're looking in pretty good shape. And in terms of water storage, just in general for Colorado Springs, we're looking really good. So I don't anticipate that we'll be in water restrictions for 2024. So with that, I think we can go ahead and take a few questions, and then we'll move into what water providers can do to help mitigate some of these risks and what individuals can do to steward water.
Great. So we do have a few questions in the chat. And the first question is if you could repeat what the problem runoff was into some aquifers.
Oh, yeah. So with the alluvial aquifers, those are typically being replenished by surface water. And anytime you have surface water running over asphalt, concrete, any type of surface, it collects a lot of contaminants. And then a lot of those can be cleaned up at the water treatment plant. But you may have heard about PFAS. Those are the microplastics that are those forever chemicals that we have a problem with those because they cause different types of cancer and different reproductive disorders. They because we have a lot of military bases that used firefighting chemicals in our county that contained PFAS, we are seeing plumes of contamination occur in some of our aquifers. I think Widefield and the Widefield aquifer is the most prominent example of that, but they have installed treatment facilities to be able to deal with the PFAS. But it is showing up in different areas throughout El Paso County, and I just expect that we're going to be seeing more and more detected, especially because the EPA increased the requirements for testing for related to PFAS. So if you see more information about PFAS in our local news, that is something that we're expecting. Water providers are very aware of those contaminants in the area, and we're all making a plan to deal with those and make sure they're out of our drinking water.
Great. Thanks for telling us more about PFAS. And is it known how much water is actually in the Denver basin?
Yeah, yes, there is. They monitor that pretty closely. So the entity that monitors the amount of water in the Denver Basin aquifers is the U.S. Geological Survey. So you can just go online and look at all the volume of water in the Denver Basin aquifers. So that's pretty well known. I mean, it's modeled, so it has some error there, but it's very important. So it's pretty well defined.
Great. And then, and one more question. Um, will these maps, and I'm not sure specifically which maps this person was asking about, but some of the maps that you had shown on your slides, are they publicly available?
Yeah, all those maps are publicly available. I would say the most important ones are in that El Paso County Water Master Plan. Oh, okay, so the water diversion maps.
Yes.
Yeah, that one. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, go ahead. I just am glad you saw it in the chat.
Yeah, the water diversion maps, those are all available at csu.org. You can see the system as well as that ArcGIS story map. Those are really helpful, great teaching tools to be able to share that kind of show where the water comes from, how it gets to our community, and what the sources are.
Perfect. And I did put the water the story map, the ArcGIS story map in the chat. So check out that link, everyone. And that's all the questions I'm seeing right now. So people in who are participating live, if you want to put your questions in the chat as Catherine continues talking, there'll be another question time at the end.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Alyssa. So we'll go ahead and move on. What I wanted to do now is just share with you some of the statewide efforts to address Colorado's water situation from the state perspective. Then we'll look at local water providers, and then we'll talk about individuals. So in terms of water consumption in the state of Colorado, from the consumptive perspective, 90% of the water is consumed by agriculture. So that's a pretty high percentage. And a lot of people are typically surprised at that. But that's what we use most of our water for. 7% is municipal consumption. So the cities and municipalities within Colorado are really not using the biggest piece of the pie. And then 3% is for industrial use. So as we move forward, you're going to see this pie shift a little bit as some of that water that was previously used in agriculture becomes used in cities. What we're hoping to do is just ensure that that water is shared and not necessarily taken away from our rural communities. So our responsibility, what I believe in a municipal area, is to ensure that our water use in our cities is as efficient as possible so that we are minimizing our impacts on our rural communities and we're supporting a high quality of life in our Colorado cities. So in order to help accomplish this goal, the Colorado Water Conservation Board drafted up and revised what's called the Colorado Water Plan. The original Colorado Water Plan was published in 2015, and this version that was released in 2023 was an update and a new framework to help Colorado meet its water challenges. It also identifies funding priorities and other resources to help communities implement programs and projects. Now, one of the agency actions within the Colorado Water Plan is to identify turf replacement options that can support transformative landscape change. So what I wanted to do was point that out just because the Colorado Water Conservation Board is encouraging communities to move towards more water-wise landscapes. in addition to a whole other set of projects and programs and priorities to ensure a sustainable water supply for our state. In addition, there was a turf replacement program created and funded in 2023. 37 entities throughout the state applied for funding. There was $2 million available and 30 entities were approved. In addition to this, there was a Colorado River Drought Task Force that was formed that was comprised of a lot of different members throughout the state. And they also came up with 8 recommendations, one of which was to increase funding and support of municipal turf removal. So they decided to take the stand that they thought that turf removal should be continued through the state and to increase the funding from $2 million a year to $5 million a year. Now, this recommendation will be taken up by the legislature. The Drought Task Force didn't have any ability to fund that recommendation, but it is something that they did include in their report. There was also an urban landscape water conservation task force that was formed with 21 members. I served on this committee and it was a real honor to be able to have input into their final report. But the idea there was to identify opportunities that can provide sustained outdoor water savings in ways that support vibrant communities and avoid unintended consequences. So this was a really important effort that looked at how do we sustain vibrant landscapes within the state of Colorado and still use water wisely. So we don't want to go all the way to just unplanted rock. How do we still have sustainable water use in our landscapes in Colorado? So there were 10 key recommendations that came out of this report and 11 different areas that they identified for more research. You can see some of the buckets on the right there where the task force felt like it was important to make a specific recommendation. And that would include things like ensuring that landscape codes consider water use so that new construction is built in a water-wise fashion. So there were some really smart ideas, and if you get the opportunity to read that report, I would encourage you to do so, especially if you're interested in water-wise landscaping. And then we also did have a bill introduced in this new legislative year that went ahead and passed, and that prohibits local governments and HOAs from installing new non-functional turf grass in the following property types. So commercial properties, institutional properties, industrial properties, and transportation corridors. So with the new legislation being in place, what that means is little pieces of turf grass, like you can see in this median, wouldn't be turf grass in the future. So it's not requiring turf grass to be removed from existing properties, but just saying in new construction, if that particular piece of turf grass is not used by humans on a regular basis, then you have to find a different planting material. Okay, now we're going to move quickly into the role of water providers, and then we'll move into individual actions. So in terms of water providers, what we see in El Paso County is we have one large water provider, which is Colorado Springs Utilities. We have a lot of small water providers, and we have some maybe mid-sized. What we see is that the smaller water providers have fewer resources to address these challenges than the larger water providers. And so there's been a lot of discussions about how we can regionalize some of these services to help pool our resources so everyone benefits. So if you think about it, with a hydrological cycle, a water molecule doesn't really know what community it's supposed to be used in. It's just evaporating and condensing and precipitating and soaking in. It's just going through its water cycle. But we put rules on those water molecules to help us avoid fighting with each other. At the same time, all of our water providers are facing similar challenges, including things like very high infrastructure costs. It costs a lot of money to build a water treatment plant or to build a wastewater treatment plant. We all are facing limited options for more supply acquisition. And so the more we can regionalize, these solutions will benefit all of us, which is going to benefit the whole entire county. Oops, wrong direction. And so what we're seeing right now is that where in the past maybe a water provider would have hunkered down a little bit and protected their own system, we're seeing that more water providers are evaluating regional solutions. And so the idea there is to leverage existing infrastructure to deliver water, to increase reuse, because a lot of the water in El Paso County that could be reused is not currently being reused, and to minimize the amount of additional supplies needed. And so there's a really good estimate in the El Paso County Water Master Plan. If we don't regionalize, then we all have to go out and get more water to minimize the risks to our communities. But if we work together, then we could get less water, less new water into the county to meet the same goals. So these discussions are ongoing. There's several different projects that are being studied. Um, there's different ways that this could be done, and it needs to be done in a way that honors the various communities and ensures that they have the flexibility to be able to meet the needs of their own community. So we do need to continue to discuss priorities and find opportunities to reduce water waste, but we also need to move forward on some of these feasible options that showcase real ways that we could collaborate together. Now, there is one particular project that is moving into just a very initial design phase to explore, and that's a regional project. I personally don't feel qualified to talk about that project because I'm not a water supply planner, but if you're interested in that, I can put you in contact with some of our folks here at Colorado Springs Utilities that might be able to tell you more about that one. But we're starting to dip our toe into this regionalization effort, and I think that's just a positive thing for everybody. Okay, and now we're going to just move lastly into stewardship actions for individuals. So what can we do at our own homes and businesses to be able to steward water more wisely here in El Paso County? Well, if we look at a typical household water use, this is how it typically breaks down in Colorado Springs for a single family residential household. You can see that about 35% of the water used in the year is used for landscaping. The biggest water use in the home is toilets, closely followed by showers and baths, faucets, clothes washing, and leaks. Now, the good thing to note here is that your dishwasher really does not use much water. So feel free to use your dishwasher as much as you want because it's not using very much water at all. However, making your landscape more water wise is a big opportunity to manage your household's water use. And so if someone asked me what are the main recommendations for stewarding water at the individual level, here's what I would say. Number one, it's really important to fix any leaks you have because leaks don't benefit anyone. It's just water that's just been collected, treated, delivered, and is not producing any value. Another thing you could do is replace old toilets and shower heads, especially if you have an older toilet. Those are really worthwhile changing out. There are wonderful toilets now that only use 0.8 gallons per flush. I have one in my basement myself and it's worked great. I really don't have any problems with that toilet at all. And shower heads can be another water saving fixture that you can just exchange and save significant amounts of water in your home. If you have faucets that are using more water, maybe consider putting an aerator on those in your kitchen or your bathroom. Those are places where those could really be of value. And if you have an older washing machine, certainly updating that can be very helpful to your indoor water use. In terms of outdoor water use, making sure that you check your irrigation system monthly for any leaks, breaks, runoff, that can be a really helpful thing to do because we just see that irrigation systems typically have issues every once in a while, and that's normal. We just need to make sure that we're fixing those as best we can. We also want to make sure that we're scheduling our irrigation systems wisely, and that might mean using a smart controller, or it might mean scheduling for the actual weather. but we have some resources to be able to help you do that together. And then the last thing would be changing to water-wise plants and grasses. So if you've kind of dialed in your irrigation system and you want to permanently reduce the amount of water that your landscape requires, then changing to water-wise plants and grasses would be a really great thing to do. And both Colorado Springs Utilities and Colorado State University Extension have a tremendous amount of resources on water-wise plants. All right, so if you are considering some of those actions, it is possible that your community might have help for you. So I would look for things like leak repair programs. Are there programs that can help you identify and repair leaks? Um, are there toilet rebates? In Colorado Springs, if you're a residential water customer of Colorado Springs Utilities, you can get a $100 rebate for installing a 0.8 gallon per flush toilet. There are also low-income assistant programs, particularly the HEAT program that will do energy efficiency upgrades as well as water efficiency upgrades. And then there's, for Colorado Springs Utilities customers, we also have free shower heads and free faucet aerators that you can take advantage of from our conservation center. In terms of irrigation system improvements, you want to look for things like sprinkler head, high efficient nozzle, and smart controller rebate programs. A lot of water providers, especially municipalities and special districts, will offer rebates for updating your sprinkler system equipment to some of these more efficient products. I think for Colorado Springs Utilities, we offer $4 per high efficiency nozzles. And I'm not sure what we're offering for heads this year, but it can be a really pretty good way to offset the cost. And then in terms of irrigation scheduling, just some tips that you might want to use is if you don't have a smart controller, then you might want to consider running your irrigation system no more than 3 days per week in June, July, and August. And then in May and September, just run that 2 days a week. And then in April and October, maybe 1 day a week is a good way to start off. And if you see runoff occurring, then definitely implement a cycle and soak schedule where you take your total run time, break that up into 3 sections, water a third, wait an hour, water another third, wait an hour, and do your last third. That's a much better way to get that water to soak into the ground than watering in the morning and evening. And if you're interested in that, we can certainly point you towards resources to help you figure out how to dial in your irrigation scheduling so that you're maximizing the amount of water that's going to creating a healthy landscape. All right, and we also, there are tons of water-wise landscaping classes and information out there. Both CSU Extension and Colorado Springs Utilities, we offer education and we'd be happy to point you in the right direction to get what you need. We also have 2 demonstration gardens. One is located up by Coronado High School at 2855 Mesa Road, and another one in front of the Cottonwood Creek Recreation Center. The one in front of or close to Coronado High School, we have staff there that are available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. The one in front of Cottonwood Creek is not staffed, but is a really fantastic little gem of a garden to look at water-wise plants. All right, and then we do have a turf replacement program for Colorado Springs Utilities residential water customers. And this program, I think Alyssa provided the link to get to that, but the offer is that if you attend 2 classes and you're willing to show proof that you prepared your yard, then we'll give you free native grass seed and free high efficiency sprinkler nozzles. So we do not offer a xeriscape rebate, although some of the local water providers within El Paso County do that. We instead offer this turf replacement program and other educational resources, as well as irrigation rebates. Another thing that I would just encourage you to do is to think about sustaining trees. As we move towards water-wise landscapes, we definitely want to preserve the benefits that trees offer to our community, and we do have to water them indefinitely. And when you are thinking about adding a tree to your landscape, Make sure that you're choosing a really smart species and follow all the extension information on tree planting so that that tree is set up for success. And then the last thing I'll just say that individuals can do is support public green spaces. As we see housing type change to more of multifamily development in municipal areas, we need to ensure that everybody has equitable access to green spaces in our community. It's so important that people have the ability to get the recreational benefits, the health benefits, the environmental benefits, and certainly the benefits from a tree canopy. So the more that you can do to advocate for public green spaces like parks, like common areas in HOA developments, the better and healthier our communities will be. So with that, I think we can go ahead and take some more questions if there are any, Alyssa, and thanks so much for the opportunity to share this hour with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine. You shared so much great information and great resources. I tried to keep up and put most of those resources in the chat for everyone. We do have a question about toilets, and I put in the toilet rebate option with the ultra high efficiency toilet information in the chat. However, the question was if you have any thoughts on composting toilets and if that was the type of toilet you have in your basement.
Oh, yeah. I have no experience with composting toilets, so I am not qualified to comment on that. But I will say that the type of toilet that I put in my basement was what they call an ultra high efficiency toilet, meaning that if you go and buy a toilet within the state of Colorado, it has to be 1.6 gallons per flush or less. But these ultra high efficiency uses half that amount. So they only use 0.8 gallons per flush. So think about less than a gallon to flush your toilet. And a lot of people were concerned that they were going to cause a lot of plumbing issues. But I put one in my basement to test it out. We have 5 people living in our house and we've had no issues. It's worked really, really great. So yeah, check those out. And that would be the one that's eligible for the $100 rebate. Anything that uses more water than that is not available. And I don't think we rebate composting toilets either.
So thanks for answering that. And then we might need some more information on how this person wants the question answered. So um, Carla asked a question, how about a water, food, not lawns effort? And if you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm a huge vegetable gardener, and I think that we, throughout El Paso County, we have amazing water systems that our forerunners created for us. So we are not at a point where we have to minimize all use of water. I don't want to set that stage. What we need to do is be wise with the way that we're using water. And to me, um, growing vegetables is absolutely something that most of our water systems can support and provides a ton of benefits. So if somebody wanted to go from a lawn to vegetable gardening, I think that's a perfect transition. What we're trying to do within our most water conservation programs is first and foremost look for waste. Where are there leaks? Where are there breaks? Where is runoff occurring? Where do we have plants that we're not using on a regular basis? So really trying to evaluate how we're using water and if there are ways that we could get similar or even better benefits for the same amount of water as where we are today. So we're not at a place where we have to like just keep ratcheting down our quality of life. What we need to do is see how we can enhance our quality of life and still be wise with our water use.
Great. And can you tell us, sorry, I have a number of questions. I'm trying to scroll back to the right one. So is the state of Colorado going to increase the storage of rainwater from 110 gallons per home?
I have not heard any efforts to do that. And the reason that I think behind, I don't think anybody's thinking that they would increase that primarily because virtually every single drop of rain or snow that lands in the state of Colorado is spoken for. Either we have to deliver it to another state or the country of Mexico because of a compact that we have, or somebody within the state of Colorado has a right to that water droplet. So, being able to capture rainwater in a municipality has potential impacts on the water right holders, primarily in agriculture. So they did pass that original rain barrel law to be able to test the question, but I haven't seen anybody pushing to push that forward to go further.
Great. Thank you. And we are at time, so if people need to leave, they can. But if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I can always send them to Catherine and have her continue to answer questions. But one other question is if you could maybe talk a little bit about gray water usage.
Sure. So gray water, of course, is water that's coming from your laundry or other faucets, typically not your kitchen or your toilets, but shower typically or laundry that would be then used for landscape irrigation. And that is regulated at the county department level. So the El Paso County Department of Health is the regulatory agency for gray water. And I have not personally kept up on what they have talked about or what's allowed in terms of gray water. But what I can say is that because Colorado Springs Utilities already trades um, the water that can be reused for other rights, you'll probably not see Colorado Springs Utilities creating any incentives for gray water. It doesn't mean that it's not a valuable use of water, but just from the system perspective, there's not any benefit to the Colorado Springs system by encouraging more people to do gray water. Now, that being said, at the individual homeowner level, it can certainly be a valuable investment, but I would just check with the El Paso County Department of Health for updated regulations and guidance on that.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Catherine, and this was a really wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Alyssa.